Basketball Digest. Kevin, KD, why do people call you KD?
Can I call you KD? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first name is Kevin.
Right.
And my second name, my last name is Durant with a D.
KD?
Hopefully that's on a David Letterman Netflix special coming up soon. Welcome to The Jump, though, here on ESPN2. I'm George Sedano. It's NBA Media Day, so there's some laughs, but also some serious news going on around the league, which we begin with Kyrie Erving, speaking of serious news, who was not present at Nets Media Day, but did speak virtually. Find out what he said in just a moment. Ben Simmons did not show up in Philly as promised. Can the Sixers overcome that distraction? Zion apparently had offseason surgery. We'll get an update on his health from Pelicans Media Day. And is it fair to consider Luka Doncic the MVP favorite? We travel the Media Day circuit right now on The Jump. All right, what's up? All right, I'll be joined by Zach Lowe and Ramona Shelburne here in just a bit. But first, here's Kevin Durant earlier at Nets Media Day when asked about Kyrie Erving. Let's take a listen.
Kyrie is not here today. There's this law here in New York with health and safety protocols. Are you concerned about his availability at home games going forward?
No.
So you expect that not to be an issue?
I expect it not to be. That's on Kyrie, and that's his personal decision. What he does is not on us to speculate what may happen. But we trust in Kyrie, and I expect us to have our whole team at some point.
All right, and now joining us is the man who asked KD that question, Brian Windhorst. Kyrie Erving was not present at Nets Media Day due to health and safety protocols. And here's what he said about his vaccination status when asked at a virtual press conference.
Honestly, I like to keep that stuff private, man. I'm a human being first, and obviously living in this public sphere, there's just a lot of questions about what's going on in the world of Kyrie, and I think I just would love to just keep that private and handle it the right way with my team and go forward. Obviously I'm not able to be present there today, but that doesn't mean that I'm putting any limits on the future of me being able to join the team. And I just want to keep it that way. So please respect that, my privacy.
So welcome back, Brian. So how are the Nets handling this controversy surrounding Kyrie?
Well, you can understand why this is confusing, because last week General Manager Sean Marks said, we expect everybody to be ready. Here today we have Kevin Durant saying, I don't expect his availability to be a problem. You have Kyrie saying, I'm not going to talk about it, but I expect to be with my team. But that isn't clear how any of that's going to happen. And what they've said was going to happen isn't happening. So it definitely leaves you in a bit of a weird scratching your head world here. The thing about this is not on the NBA's terms. This is a decision by the city of New York. He cannot get an exemption from the NBA and play, and he is facing the reality. If he doesn't become compliant or get an exemption, he is not going to be able to practice here in Brooklyn, and he is not going to be able to play in games here in Brooklyn, in New York, in San Francisco, and potentially even in Toronto. That's well over half of the season. That is not a tenable way to go forward. So how this proceeds from here is really a mystery. We are in completely uncharted territory. We have never seen anything like this. The Nets have been working on this, George, for 4 or 5 weeks. This isn't something that just landed on their lap. Since this order came down in mid-August, they knew this potentially could be a problem. They had several other players who were not compliant. Those players became compliant because everybody was here today except for Kyrie, and we will just have to wait and see what happens next.
And since we've heard from two of the big three, let's hear from James Harden, Brian, who you spoke to as well, and asked about his personal contract extension as we talk actual basketball here.
It's not about the money for me. It's not about, I've been on enough teams where we fell short. My mindset and my goal is to make sure that we're able to build and continue to build this team to be able to compete and contend for multiple years at the highest level. So it's not about the money. You win a championship in New York, the money will come.
So certainly that contract situation is something that people are going to keep an eye on, Brian. So do you get a sense the Nets and Harden will get a deal done soon?
Well, this is the other thing that's going on with the Nets. Earlier this summer, when they got the Kevin Durant extension done, Sean Marks said he hoped by today that that Harden and Kyrie Irving would have similar long-term extensions. That has not happened. And the reason I asked Harden that question was because he can sign a contract extension right now for 3 years, or if he becomes a free agent next year, he can sign for 5 years and about $90 million more. That's why he says the money doesn't matter, but frankly, I don't 100% believe that. The money has to matter at that level. So, and with Kyrie Irving, they're trying to get him on the court to play now, much less worrying about 3-4 years from now. So those deals not getting done, I would say it's mildly concerning because no player likes to have this hang over them in training camp, and you don't want Irving and Harden to be possible free agents next year. So another thing to watch with the championship favorite Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, certainly not what Sean Marks envisioned by any stretch of the imagination. Brian, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, man. Going to be interesting as heck to follow all season long. So thanks again.
Thanks, George.
Okay, so I want to bring in our panel here. Senior writers, Ramona Shelburne, and of course the host of the Low Post podcast, Zach Lowe, to discuss more on the Nets. And Zach, we'll start with you. Could vaccination status stand in the way of the Nets' success this season?
In theory, of course it could. If Kyrie Irving is going to be unable to play at home and that persists for the entire season, including the playoffs, absolutely, they're no longer the championship favorites, even though they still have James Harden and Kevin Durant. And boy, does the James Harden trade all of a sudden go from luxury to absolutely essential as of today. But look, the Nets have all along been pretty confident. No one's going to miss games. They'll get this taken care of. But as Wendy said, that confidence was sort of like as of today. And I sense that they're a little bit shaken by the sense that it's not done as of today. I guess we can take confidence in Kevin's comments about we assume he's going to be on the team, Kyrie's comments about no limits on the future. But until it's done, until he's playing, I don't think there's a reason to have no concern. And I also don't think there's a contract extension until it's done.
You know, what's interesting in the NFL, they went through this a couple of months ago when players were reporting to training camps. And I was speaking to an agent for an NBA player, for a lot of NBA players, whose agency also represents NFL players. And he said, you know, the NFL reframed this as accountability and availability. You're accountable to your team and you're available to your team. And I think what's happened in the NBA lately with the status of vaccinations is it has not been framed as accountability and availability to your team. It's been framed as is somebody going to make me do something? Is it a mandate that I don't feel comfortable with and I don't want to do it because it's not my choice? It's somebody making me do it. There needs to be a reframing of this in the NBA in order for these kinds of things to be settled like they have in the NFL, or it's going to be a storyline all year. It's one or the other. And I think with a team like the Nets that has championship aspirations, as Zach said, you can't look at this and say it's not going to affect them. Kyrie Irving's an all-star player. I mean, he's an incredible player for them that they're counting on. If he's not there for half their games or more, that's going to affect him.
Yeah, and look, he's not the only player, a star level or all-star caliber player that is dealing with this. We know that Devin Booker is going to be in health and safety protocols after his Twitch conversation recently, and Bradley Beal revealed that he is not vaccinated as well. So, Ramona, this is something, to your point, that's not just going to affect the Nets at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all across the league. And we're talking about a relatively small number of players at this point. If you talk in terms of percentages, it's probably the NBA is close to 90%, but the 10% that are not are going to be that are not vaccinated are going to be subject to much stricter rules, and especially so in San Francisco and in New York. I think it will only get stricter across the country. Those are the first two markets who have taken this step, but I think it will only get stricter across the country. And so the Players Union has thus far stood firm in saying it's up to the player, and there's testing protocols that you can go through if you don't want to be vaccinated. But at some point, as Brian said in the interview you did with him, George, it is going to be up to the governments, the local governments, and the NBA and the Players Union. Their rules don't necessarily supersede what the local governments say.
Well, to Ramona's point, there are other markets, big markets, teams in big markets that are watching this and wondering, particularly in Los Angeles, I think, wondering, are the New York and San Francisco laws, which, by the way, are a little bit different. The San Francisco one's even stricter than the New York one. Are those going to be applied to us? Now, the Lakers last week, they said we're fully vaccinated, so they're done. They have this taken care of. But this does not appear to be going away. Like Ramona said, it's a relatively small percentage of players. And I think the Golden State case is going to be interesting because any of these cases are going to be interesting because the union and the teams, as Brian said, there is no precedent for any of this. And I think they're still negotiating right now. What is the penalty, if any, if a player can't play in the home games? Can the teams withhold salary? How much of the salary? There's no precedent for any of this. They're still negotiating it right now at the 11th hour before the season starts.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild, wild time here over the next couple of weeks for sure as we try to see all this unfold in real time. All right, Zach, Ramona, thank you. You guys will be back in just a little bit. But before we get to our next guest, Doc Rivers spoke today at Sixers Media Day on Ben Simmons. Let's take a listen.
We're going to focus on who's here. We're going to try to build our team out to who's here right now with hopes that we do have Ben at some point. But right now, that can't be our focus. Our focus, I can only touch the people who are in front of me.
And now we welcome in Tim Bontemps from Sixers Media Day. Tim, what was the overall reaction to Simmons being absent in Philly?
Well, George, I would say the overall reaction was disappointment, and that was disappointment for a variety of reasons. You know, Tobias Harris said he was disappointed that he didn't see this coming because he said if that had been the case, he'd have gotten the whole team together the day after that Game 7